So yeah, this is my introduction to Subversion. As you can see, I'm making this available under the Creative Commons license, so feel free to grab this from my website. The URL's there later, and I'll email it to the list afterwards so if anybody wants it. It's there in PDF, XSI, which is the OpenOffice presentation format, and HTML. And by HTML, I mean lots of JPEGs with HTML pages wrapping them gently. That's how OpenOffice exports its HTML. So, or that's one way it can. Let's see here. And I did not have my stuff either. Apologize. All right. So this talk is kind of lengthy, so I'm going to go pretty fast in the beginning, but feel free to slow me down if you have questions, comments, etc. So what Subversion is all about is it's supposed to be a replacement for CBS, which of course was a replacement for RCS, which was a replacement for CBS. Yes, thank you. All right. So CBS, pretty good by and large. Had a few things were difficult in CBS. Mainly, I found in large projects, branching, tagging, merging, renaming a file in CBS. Renaming a directory, you got to do it on the repository end, so it's kind of garbage. So, of course, what all revision control tools do is they record the revision history of the document, and they give you various ways to manipulate those documents. So, you know, if you've been coding for a month down a dead end, you can say, oh shit, none of this is going to work. Let me throw away this month's work, but so this is the replacement for having tar run out of cron every night. This is a slightly better way to do things. And also a big thing with Subversion and CBS is that it allows for concurrent development. In fact, the C in CBS, I believe, was concurrent, stood for concurrent. And so, of course, that allows the development team to work on the same code base with minimum friction. Okay, so since Subversion is meant to replace CBS, it supports basically everything CBS does, and the exceptions tend to be when a CBS feature is actually more like a bug. Now, a chap on the list did bring up 2 points in which he thought CBS was actually better, and hopefully we'll remember those. So we'll get to the diff one later, and the other one I might just have to throw up my hands and say I don't know. Which I don't like to do, but if most of you have probably used CBS or seen it, the SVN command line is going to look very familiar to you. By and large, the commands are called the same thing, they do the same thing, they take the same options, by and large. And we'll see, let's see. The cool thing about Subversion is that directories, renames, and metadata are actually the revision is actually controlled in Subversion. It's not in CBS. So in CBS, a directory is simply a directory in the repository. You can't say, give me this directory as it was 6 months ago. CBS is going to be like, eh. Subversion will oblige. And the metadata is cool. We'll see how that works a little later, but for now, just take my word for it that it's version. Commits are atomic. If any of you have used CBS on a big project and you commit 30 files at the same time as somebody else does and 2 of those files overlap, well, it's possible that 15 of his files beat your commit, but then you slip in a file. So it's all interleaved, and that can create some really nasty, hairy, disgusting things that cause a lot of work for CBS administrators. And I know because I've been a CBS administrator for a long time, and it's not fun. So in Subversion, it's like a transactional database, right? When you say commit, it starts a transaction, and it does not commit that transaction unless the whole thing can be done atomically. So, hurrah. Revision numbers. Now, this is a big difference. This is an important point. Let me point. Revision numbers and log messages are per commit, not per file. Now, what this means is that in CBS, if I have 3 files in a directory and I commit to one of them, that file's revision gets bumped. Okay, I commit to another file, its revision gets bumped. The third file its revision is still whatever it was before. Okay, so each file has an independent revision. In Subversion, and this takes some getting used to when you first start it, every time you commit, that bumps the revision number of the entire repository. Okay, so you commit even one single file, that takes the whole thing to a new revision number. Now, in the beginning, you're like, what the hell, this is the stupidest thing ever. But then I found after a week, I realized, no, this is a much better way of doing things. And you'll see why later. But it has a lot to do with branching, tagging, conflict resolution, that sort of thing. Now, the only thing that this does mean, I'll talk about that later, right? That's important. Just like CBS, it's client-server. Subversion can do the standard CBS server thing where you connect over SSH or, God forbid, Telnet. And by Telnet, I actually mean our shell, not Telnet. But or it can run as an Apache module using WebDAV. Now, the WebDAV stuff seems really, really cool, and it sounds cool. I've not got it running successfully yet, but I only spent a day or two on it, and part-time, because when I was doing all my Subversion stuff, I was also lead developer on a project that had to be done a month ago, so I couldn't fuss around with Subversion ad nauseum. Though there was some nausea. Okay, so I'm going to just talk about the SSH thing. Actually, everything I show you is going to be local. It doesn't matter with Subversion. Cool thing about Subversion is that the client keeps a bunch of data locally in the working copy, which in CBS it really doesn't. So CBS you can't do much offline, but Subversion you can actually get a fair bit of work done offline. Obviously you can't commit because there's no repository to talk to, but and you can. Okay, client and server were designed to use bandwidth efficiently. That's what that Delta V stuff is all about. Delta V is kind of like an rsync style thing where you transfer just parts of files. I don't know why they didn't just use librsync, but I don't know.
Maybe it wasn't around when it started?
No. Librsync been around forever, and SVN's pretty new, but whatever. I don't know what the difference between the two algorithms are, but that's basically, it's for efficient bandwidth usage. So, because they realize that projects are big, some have hundreds of developers, like open source projects, which is what Subversion is for. It was developed by the Apache Foundation, so they actually have 3 people who are being paid full-time to work on it. So it is open source software. It is free software, depending on your definition of
what is it on Tigris then?
Tigris is just the Apache Foundation's project, SourceForge clone, I believe. Okay. That was my understanding. If anybody knows differently, if I'm wrong, tell me, but I
don't know.
Okay.
I didn't think they were associated.
But yeah, that's right. It's subversion.tigris.org. But Tigris just appears to be a SourceForge-like thing. SourceForge, of course, doesn't have Subversion yet, but they're supposed to be rolling it out sometime soon-ish, which will be really cool. And terminology, all right. Repository is the central location where the server stores the files, and this is typically in a Berkeley DB setup. Luckily, there is an alternative. The Subversion root is something that I took from CBS. In CBS, we all remember the CBS root, environment variable, and all that stuff. Subversion doesn't really have the concept of Subversion root, but I found that if you keep all of your repositories in one directory, that makes a lot of sense on the server. So I call that the Subversion root, and other people seem to too. So terminology, I think, is good. And the working copy is your local checkout of a repository, just like in CBS, same deal. Though CBS have these things called sandboxes, which I think is interchangeable, really, with working copy. Creating a Subversion root, mkdir. Like I said, you don't need to use a Subversion root at all, but it makes sense for organization and ease of administration. You can create a repository anywhere, though. I mean, that's just a file system command. Okay, so the Subversion command line, like I said, just like CVS, it uses a CVS, it uses a Subversion binary, which then has subcommands. So all the commands take the form of SVN something, possibly options, possibly arguments. Unlike CVS, there's no distinguishing between global and local options, which I think is great because that stuff was a good place to trip yourself up, especially since some of the global options and local options actually collided. So -F might mean something different, which is, I think, terrible design. But I wasn't consulted in the design process of CVS, which is shocking, I know, but they never consult me about anything, and I have all the answers. What the hell? So common options, -- force. This was -F in CVS, but I think they wanted you to really mean it, so you want to type a lot. -Q means shut up. -V means tell me everything. -R, revision, means operate only on this revision, and you can use the : second revision for a range. Works like a array slice in Ruby or Perl or Python or etc. Java, who knows. Targets, I've never used this, but you can put a bunch of arguments in a file. I guess this makes sense if you're doing operations on lots of files or directories and you want to suck it in from an external file. Whatever, I've never used it. Okay, -N. This is really important, the -N. Subversion by default is recursive. CVS by default, in most cases, is not, except when it is. So, you know. So, typically in Subversion, unless you say do not be recursive, it's going to do everything. Now, the most useful thing is when you do an SVN add of a directory, it adds all the files in that directory and all the subdirectories. CVS? No, not so much. You gotta add them. Yeah, it's terrible. So, you know, that leads to the writing of shell scripts, and that's no good. The most useful Subversion command, I think, is help. And it works, you can say SVN help any Subversion subcommand, and it will give you all the options. So, like SVN help copy, for example. SVN help commit. So to create a repository, I say, you know, create an SVN root first, indicator, whatever, and I'm just making it in my home directory. Choose a data store, and as of Subversion 1.1, thank God they've given you an alternative to Berkeley DB. I hate Berkeley DB, I always have. I don't understand. I mean, some people, you know, it's wonderful, whatever. Well, it's cruppy. It breaks all the time. It's a pain in the ass to administer. What's so wonderful about it? And Subversion really proves this because when I upgraded from 1.0 to 1.1, using the Berkeley DB, it seemed like every third commit would actually wedge the Berkeley DB, and I had to recover it. So, I don't know, but whatever. So, you also have this wonderful FS file store. And I say, please use FS. Now, the difference, they go into, there's like seriously a 5-page discussion of the differences between Berkeley DB and FS. And then what it boils down to is Berkeley DB is faster, except when FS is faster, and vice versa. So, really, performance-wise, I have not noticed a penalty to using FS. And the wonderful thing about FS is you can have it on a remote file system, so NFS. Put a Berkeley DB on NFS and you're begging for trouble. You're saying, please, ruin my life, please. SVN admin. Now, unfortunately, for the sake of this presentation, I did everything local, which is in retrospect probably not that smart, because now you don't know which commands run on the server and which, so I'll tell you. Everything on this page is the server. Okay. To create a repository on the server, you run SVN admin create and give it a path under your SVN root, again optional. And then this is the name of the repository. Now, you can't you can't give it subdirectories down in the repository or anything like that. Think of the repository as a database. I mean, you're creating a database, whether it's a Berkeley DB file, cluster, was that out loud? Or whether it's an FSFS, ideally, it is a database. You should treat it as a black box. Unlike CBS, you can't just poke around in there and move things around and expect no trouble, because Subversion will hate you. And then Berkeley DB, just use create, and it's the default. But please don't do that. If you do not post a TLUG and expect me to help you. I will slack, and I will say, you bastard, you should listen to me. Why not Berkeley DB? Okay, I think I've covered this. I hate it. It causes my hair to fall out. I don't like it at all. Okay, projects and repositories. All right, and I've talked about this before, but repositories revision numbers are repository-wide. Repository-wide. So if you keep, in CBS, you keep a bunch of projects in the same repository. Sure, why not? I mean, we all do. In Subversion, do not do this. You should, project should equal repository in your head. Project repository. Why? Okay. If I have 3 different open source projects in the same repository and I make a commit to one of them, the revision number for all of them go up because they're in the same repository. Not what you mean most of the time. I mean, I guess this could make sense if there's a very close relationship between separate projects, but in that case, why are they separate projects? So, anyway, it's my philosophy. Use a separate repository for each project. If you don't ask for help, etc. You know the song and dance. Okay, importing a new project. For you CBS people, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, sorry. Anyway,
Just yell it out. What if you have, let's say, like common libraries of subroutines or subfunctions?
Then you're doomed. You fool. No, go on. I'm standing up. I might as well be funny, right? Sorry, go on. I'm sorry.
So, should I, from this common library, then creating like 3 or 4 different applications out of it.
Yeah.
Right. So, create the library as one project.
I
or put everything under.
I would say if it's a library, it should, and you kind of said it yourself. You're using it for 3 different applications. So, in my opinion, that's a standalone project. You know, the library itself, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, I guess there is the argument that when the library revision changes, it could affect the API, but, you know, I don't think it's worth having common revision numbers. I think that's confusing. That would confuse a lot of people. But, yeah, so, if you have questions, interrupt me because I might not see hands because I don't look at the audience enough. Which some of you might appreciate. Okay, so importing a new project. As in CBS, this is the first step. What this means, this is not the same as creating the repository, but it's very close. Okay, on the Subversion server, you run the SDN admin create command to create the repository. Now, on the client, and again, I'm sorry for doing it this way. On the client, create this project skeleton. Now, if you read the Subversion documentation, they tell you to do it like this. They tell you when you have a project, create 3 top-level subdirectories: branches, tags, and trunk. Why? You'll see. But everybody does it this way, and this is a good way of doing it. So please just do this always. I mean, just copy and paste my stuff.
Is there a reason why they just didn't make that into the command?
You know, it's not the Unix way, forcing a certain way of doing things.
You need it to work, so...
The Unix way is knowing that you must do things a certain way, but not forcing anyone to do it.
And it just won't work if you don't do it that way.
You just get really pissed off when people don't know the right way to do things. Sorry.
That's a management decision.
You're right. It is. And I'm being a little cheeky, but you're absolutely right. But please do it like this, because if you don't, a lot of the Subversion documentation won't make a whole lot of sense to you. Okay, so once you have blah, blah, blah. Oh, wow, I did something stupid and wrong. No, I didn't. I was right. Okay. Create the front-end directory, and then cd into the skeleton top-level directory. Run the svn import command. Now, this is on the client. Okay. If this repository was running on a remote machine, instead of file here, I would have svn plus ssh. Or if it's web dev, I think it's just svn : / maybe somebody knows. I haven't used web dev, sorry. Okay, you run the import. Now this populates the repository with all your files. Now we haven't created any files, we just have our skeleton. Yeah.
Just to answer the question, with WebDAV, it's just HTTP only.
Oh, is it? Yes. All right. So everybody got that. Use HTTP if it's web dev, because it is using the hypertext transfer protocol. If I had half a brain, I would have known that. However, I have only a quarter. Sorry, Mara, I lied to you too. All right. Now we haven't created any actual files. We just created a skeleton. That's why this is a new project. Okay? The first thing you do after you've imported it is you blow away the skeleton you just created, because this is not a working copy. You've imported it into the repository, but there are no .svn directories there controlling stuff. So it's not, and it's useless. Just rm-rf it, run svnco. Now what I typically do is after I do the import, I just utilize that magical, bash control or command history, and I just hit up a couple times, and I change the word import to co, and I get rid of the -n. You can do it another way, the wrong way. But so now once you have the checkout, you now have a working copy. Congratulations, advance to Park Place or whatever.
Could you go back once, please?
Yes. Is that the right?
No, other direction.
Okay, so page up.
So what's the import the skeleton?
Okay, we've created the skeleton with trunks, branches, tags, and trunk.
You created some empty directory.
Empty directories.
On my local workstation.
Right. So what the import does is it takes these empty directories and it shoves them into the repository. Now the repository knows that at the top level of this repository, of this project, we have these 3 empty directories. Okay.
Okay.
This will make more sense when we import something that is actually there. And I will show you that, I think.
Okay.
Is that good enough?
Yes.
No? Okay. Groovy. Okay. A more exciting thing might be to import an existing project where you have actual files. Now, this is a project that you've been employing revision management the tarball fashion, not a CVS project. We'll get to that later. Create the repository the same way you did before. Create the skeleton the same way you did before. Now copy your stuff into the trunk. Okay. Now, if you're using tarball revision management, you probably don't have branches and tags, because I can't imagine how the hell that would work. But if you do, feel free to populate those directories too. I'm just using rsync here to say, take everything from this directory and slap it into this one. I don't know why I talk in French when I talk about rsync. But what am I talking about? Yeah, so import the skeleton and then check out the same way we did before. So do this stuff, okay? Except instead of test new project, it's test existing project or whatever. cd //, do the rmrf. Don't worry. We used rsync, so we still have the pristine source. I've never seen an import into the repository lose your files. But it is a little scary, the rm-rf stuff, so just take my word for it. Go safe.
Why aren't you using, let's say, the checkout or check-in?
Oh, you mean RCS?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Check-in
and checkout are probably bad words, because if you're familiar with the public library, it's not really the same thing. In RCS it was. When you checked out a file, that file was gone. Nobody else could mess with it. Okay, they could check it out read-only, but that file was gone until you checked it back in, so just like a library. But in CBS and Subversion, there's checkout, but there's no check-in. Okay, so right, import using the library metaphor, import is when the library buys a load of new books, puts them on the shelves. Now, the cool thing about this library is that the shelves are virtual, right? So as many people can borrow as much stuff. Now, the other cool thing about this library is that you're allowed to scribble on the books and then put them back on the shelves. So that's called commit. Commit says, hey, Subversion, I've got changes. Take them, please. Okay. So yeah. So import shoves new files into a Subversion repository where there weren't any files before. And check out says, give me a working copy of those files.
When you check out, can you lock it so that no one else can check it out?
No. I mean, well, you can lock repositories, but not from the client. You have to do it on the server.
Oh, okay.
But there's no need to. Even with CBS, there's seldom a need to lock the repository. Same with Subversion. Typically, you lock the repository when you're going to back it up, or when you don't want your developers committing. But there are different ways to do that in Subversion that are neat. And there's also a hot backup script that ships with Subversion. It's a Python script. Only works with Berkeley DB, I believe.
So that means there's also no locking of the individual files then?
There is a transaction level locking. So there's locking being done on your behalf, but you as the client cannot say lock this file. You don't need to.
That was my question.
Yeah, trust me, you don't need to. Never.
Okay. Thank you.
There's
Another question back here.
paradigm, some of the development paradigms that, I'm working on this file, so I don't want anybody else working on it because you want to avoid any potential conflict.
Right.
Usually I guess there's lots of debate if that's really needed or not.
I say
CVS and Subversion routes say it's not needed.
Yeah, and I'd say
when you're a big project.
Yeah.
yeah, it really is.
Especially if someone has a lock and they go on vacation.
Well, I mean, because then you can get deadlocked, right?
Yeah.
And deadlocks with human beings really suck because our clock cycles are pretty slow. So deadlocks can hang around for a long time.
In the CBS, we need to take care of the file permission.
Correct. With Subversion, it's similar to CBS. Permissions are a strange and vacuous thing. If you import files into Subversion with certain permissions, there's no guarantee that those permissions are going to be what they are coming out. The ownerships are right. The ownerships are always preserved. And Subversion has an actual metadata property, a special one that tells it to set the exec bit. So this gets around the problem of CBS. A lot of times you check your Perl scripts out and they won't run because they don't have the exec bit set, so you have to write wrappers. Like I said, shell scripts, bad thing. You don't want to have to be that lazy. Subversion solves it. Does that answer your question entirely? Okay. Other?
Yeah, and about the binary files, there was also an issue with CBS. Binary files.
Binary, yes. I'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, but Subversion easy. That's the short answer. Okay, if you have a CBS project, and I'm going to skip over this really quickly. If you have a CBS project, use SVN CBS to SVN. These slides are actually up on the web, so yeah, you can snag them. I won't go into details about what this does. All I'll say is it does a pretty damn good job. It actually gets. Did you guys get around to that, Deb?
Not yet.
Deb? Did you, Debs, get around to that?
Yeah.
It works pretty well. And when it doesn't, it's pretty easy to fix things by hand. And I mean, fix things in your new Subversion repository. It will not damage your CBS version of the code. So, if you're interested in this, read my 2 slides on your own time and look at the website. Screensaver, no! Alright. That ain't gonna happen again. Bitch. My laptop should not cross me. 7 angry men. Alright. So that's an interesting topic, but I don't have time. I mean, I'm looking at the clock and I'm not doing so well. Okay, working copies. I think I explained what these are. If anybody's still fuzzy, ask now or too late. Alright. SVN status, just like CBS status, except a little more useful, tells you stuff about files in your working copy. By default, it does not communicate with the repository. Kind of strange. But what this does is it allows you to, like I said, get work done offline. I mean, because now I can run SVN status, and my working copy will tell me the changes to, this file has changed. I can use SVN diff. I can do all this stuff offline. So it's great. So -u means talk to the repository. Okay. Now, when you're not working offline, you want to do -u by default. I mean, you just find yourself always wanting to check with the repository because it's the best thing. So -v gives you lots of information, and I think I give an example of this. Okay, this is going back to my newly imported project with nothing in it. We're in the trunk, I think, and I run svn stat -uv, which means talk to the repository v verbose, and it just simply tells me your repository revision is 1, my local revision is, local revision, repository revision, or vice versa. SVN help will tell you. Oh yeah, I actually say stuff. The first field we see is the working revision. The second is blah blah. Yes, so on. Adding a file. Let's write a haiku because this is key. I first did this presentation for the Central Ohio Linux Users Group, but they appreciate their haiku there in the heartland of America. Let me tell you. As long as it's haiku about John Deere tractors and so on. Oh, I'm bad. All right, so we write a haiku. Just as in CBS, you say svn add, we have a new file. Just as in CBS, just adding the file doesn't do anything, okay? All that does is tells your working copy, hey, I have a new file. We need to communicate that to a repository. That's what a commit does, okay? So this, going back to the library, is I've written a new book, and I'm going to give it to you, all right? So, hurrah. Oh, the only interesting thing here, I'm just going to talk about that. Adding a file, svn add adds recursively. Like I said, CBS doesn't, so this is wonderful. You can give it the -n option if you want to not have it be recursive, if you want to just commit a directory and you're not ready to do subdirectories and so on. I've actually never found the need for that, but if you do, who am I to tell you that you're foolish? Autoprops is cool, and I will possibly mention it later. If I don't, just look it up. In case I don't get this far, the Subversion documentation is available. The actual O'Reilly book, Revision Control with Subversion, is available as a PDF, and I have the URL here, so grab it. They actually have version, or the book that covers 1.1, which has not been published yet, but the PDF is there. So, svn commit. I told you what it does. You can commit as many files as you want. Commit by, and actually this is wrong because this is optional. If you just say svn commit, what you're saying is take everything from this directory all the way up and commit it. Now, I find that is something you almost never want to do, because if your commits are too sweeping, then the log messages to those commits become kind of meaningless, because you might talk about 15 things, and you have no idea which file actually. So I actually like to commit things a file at a time very often. Now, if I do something in a, let's say I'm doing web development, and I have to make changes to a CGI script, a HTML template, a JavaScript file, and add 2 more images, okay, sure, it makes sense to commit that as implemented Amazon Web Services support. Good chunk. And it's there. However, that's again personal preference. You don't work for me, so I'm not the boss of you. Do whatever you want. Just don't complain to me. All right. Useful options. -m. You saw me use this in previous slide. What that does is that specifies a log message on the command line. If you don't do that, you will be confronted with your favorite editor, unless you have not set the editor variable and BI comes up instead. Then you get BI and not your favorite editor, but whatever. Now, I think it's sheer insanity to use Emacs for this kind of shit. I mean, it takes 45 seconds to start up. You write a 3-word log message, and then GNU client is wonderful. If any of you know what I'm talking about, you run one Emacs, and when you want to spawn a new window, but I just use VI. It's faster. I just use -R all the time. Editor command option will override the default editor. The editor environment variable is honored, of course, because it's Unix. And this is what you get. This is the template for a commit message, this stuff right here. And you write stuff above there, and it's really cool because it tells you what is committing. So, very useful. Very useful indeed. If you save and, if you exit without saving and VI returns a non-zero exit code, Subversion will say, or maybe that's not, no, I'm sorry, it doesn't return non-zero. Subversion just compares the template to your file and says nothing's changed and gives you this helpful message. And you usually want to say abort, because continue will commit, and you don't want to commit with incorrect log message, because you can fix it, but it's a pain. Well, not too bad, but it involves your Subversion administrator, and he does not like to be disturbed. Metal knot in the affairs of dragons, right? And it will take you back in. -M talked about it. SVN update. What this says is make my working copy current with the repository. So this sucks. Okay, commit blows, this sucks. Push and pull would be 2 other words I could use. That would not be American profanity. But how do you know when you need to update? Run SVN stat-u. Now, CVS users will remember that CVS status sometimes is not what you want because it doesn't show newly added files, so you have to use, what do? You do something really bizarre.
I always do CVS -capital N up.
Yes, exactly.
And then that just does exactly what it would do, but it doesn't.
Right. Yeah, so this is kind of, to me this is weird because people do that in lieu of status because they want to see status, but they run up. So Subversion fixed that. Updating shouldn't be able to hurt you unless you specifically don't want newer code, because you shouldn't worry about conflicts and such. We'll see how to deal with them. Useful options to SVN update. The revision, the -R revision says operate on this revision or range thereof. Okay, now this, I believe, solves Ian's problem from the mailing list. Okay, you can say I don't want to use the built-in Subversion diff. I want to use any GNU diff3 compatible diff program instead. There's also an option to pass params to that diff command. So I believe he should be able to get around his issue. His issue, for those of you who didn't read the email, was I believe that he didn't like that diff, the Subversion diff, found changes to whitespace important, right? He wanted to be able to change whitespace.
CVS diff does it too. You have to give it a command to say ignore whitespace.
Okay.
I guess Subversion doesn't have that.
Yes, so the built-in Subversion diff apparently does not, but I'm sure GNU diff in all of its wonderful glory supports that. So he could say diff3 command diff and pass it some options, and I believe that would get around his problem. Okay, just by way of an example, you can pull specific revisions. So let's say I have my free-form poem, which we'll see in all of its hideous glory. And we'll say, all right, whatever I did in revision 4 and committed, because at the time I thought it was good enough, I don't like that so much. Let me go back to revision 3. And then when you commit, that becomes revision 5. Okay? So you're basically saying, revision 4 is a dead end. It will not advance beyond this. And that's when you use the -R. SVN diff. By default, it spews a unified diff, which is the same as running diff-ru, a recursive unified diff. And of course, if you run it just on a file name, it gives you the diff. Now, what are you diffing? You're diffing your working copy of the file against the repository. Yeah, that's really useful. But the cool thing is that because Subversion stores all this stuff locally, it can do this when you're offline. So you can do diffs when you're offline, which is really useful. Because you want to know, okay, what exactly did I change in this file to the working copy? This is one of the ways in which Subversion helps you get away from the fact when you started typing in Vim and command mode and splat. What did VI do to me? All right. Here's an example. I run diff on freeform.txt. It shows me that revision 4 is the repository one. This guy is my working copy. Okay, so plus I've added a header, right? And then everything else is the same. And then down at the bottom I've added another verse couplet. I never said I was a good poet, okay? I just know how to use Subversion to facilitate my poetry. Options to SVN GIF. I think I've covered this. This one's, this is the args. Yeah, oh, you know what? I think
maybe if you just use that.
You can just use -x and feed it some arg that means to GNU diff, ignore white space.
Capital V.
And he might be golden, so I will post such to-do list. I mean, after I determine that it actually works. Sorry, go ahead. Did I hear a question from someone? No, I'm hearing things. Great.
Is this output have any compatibility with a patch command?
Yes, yes. You can take the output of SVN diff and feed it to save it off as a patch file and just run patch. It'll work. Yeah, patch loves unified diffs. Those are so easy to apply because they have line numbers and chunks and hurrah. I actually wrote I don't know why the hell I did this, but I wrote a how-to on if you need to actually go into a unified diff and tweak things. So I reverse engineered it. I'm sure that there's no reason you ever have to do that, but I did once, so I wrote it. Yeah, this was also while my deadline was looming, and I was working, past midnight, but whatever. I've never claimed to be right. No, my intelligence is high, my wisdom, kind of lowish in D&D terms. Wow. Yeah, so back to diff. This tells you specific revision, this tells you range of revisions. SVN log. Like I said, as long as you commit with meaningful log messages, they can be so wonderful. It can save you so much time. Because, reading diff is not fun exactly. It's not exactly hard, but it makes you think, and we don't like to think. So we can read log messages much easier. I mean, it's just regular old English or German or Japanese or whatever. Subversion, Unicode, good, hurrah. Me like you. Says Subversion about Unicode, is what I was trying to say. So run SVN log on a file, and you get all of the log statements, so you can see at each revision what my commit actually did. I mean, according to my log message. And there's no guarantees that my log message has any relation to reality in a meaningful fashion, however, if you trust me. Useful options, which is a mistake. Useful options to SVN log, same revision stuff. Stop on copy is very useful. I will bring that up later when we talk about branching. XML output, you can get your SVN log stuff in an XML file. So if you're writing some sort of web utility, XML, the web, they love each other, kissing cousins.
When you use -r and you ask for a range, what actually you doing?
You're saying basically show me all log messages between this revision and that.
So that option only will work with certain commands.
You'd be surprised. It works with a lot of them. It works with update. It works with diff. It works with log. It works with checkout. Lots of stuff.
Kind of scary too, right?
No, it's kind of what you need usually.
Yeah, it is useful. But it isn't scary because Subversion knows revision numbers, and it'll tell you. So it's only scary if you don't know that that the current head revision is like 26,000 something, and you're playing with revision 7. That's okay. Maybe that's scary. Okay, SD and blame. I love the name of this command. I mean, because let me tell you, when you're working in a team of more than 3 developers, chances are one of them is a bloody moron, and he's always screwing up things. Maybe not at your company, right?
We'll have brain parts.
All right, so even if you're not a moron, everybody has their stupid moments. So what blame does is says, aha, it was this fellow who has a stupid moment. Crucify him, and so on.
That's the same thing as CBS annotate, right?
Yes, it is. CBS annotate. So in Subversion, they changed it to blame, which is better. You know,
Yeah, it sounds better.
it does. I mean,
I guess it get used like that so often.
yeah, because we're geeks. Call a spade a spade. If you're wrong, you're wrong. I mean, shit. Not that I'm ever wrong. So. All right. So somebody doesn't like my poetry. Freeform poem that suck doors, says Play Ada. All right. Well, I don't like that because I think my poetry is rather good. So I want to find out the bastard who's hating on me, and I do with SVN game. So with Subversion, you must be slightly more clever when you insult your fellow coders, or when you just mess up. SVN revert is when you've just made a bloody mess of things and you're throwing up your hands and you're saying, just give me the last clean thing. This flows. Okay, revert by default is not recursive. I believe this is the only Subversion command where that is true, but it makes sense. Revert is a little dangerous. Okay. Revert is one of those commands that is not really undoable, because you're just blowing away changes to your working copy. I don't believe there's a way to undo revert. If anybody knows better, tell me, but I don't think so. Because revert throws away all the changes in your working copy and goes back to the last repository thingy. So unless you backed it up outside of Subversion, revert's the end of the line for you, buddy. Now, since I've said that, let me make sure to point out that revert is one of the very few things in Subversion that you can do that is not undoable. Commits are undoable, deletes are undoable, anything is undoable. And for all you CBS users, here's something to look forward to in Subversion. Directory deletes are undoable, because directories are reversions. Yeah? CBS, if you blow away a directory in the repository, it's gone, buddy. You ain't getting it back with any CBS commands. I mean, you pull it off the tape, maybe, but... tape. Pull it off the wire. All right. Okay. SVN copy. The SVN copy is actually what you use to branch, and that should make sense because I've said, okay, let's say I'm writing a .c file, and I realize that I now have like 45 classes in one file, and it makes sense maybe to have them in 45 different files. What you can do is you can SVN copy them to your other targets. You can, take out the, whatever. You know what I'm talking about, I hope. So, here's my example. I'm going to copy my freeform poem to a new file because I want to rework it in iambic pentameter because I realize freeform poetry sucks. Or I'm no good at it. I don't know. This is my example, so actually I'm a brilliant poet.
You're just saving the best for last. Right?
So, and then, again, once I've copied, I must commit. Because in general, every SVN command you do, except for commit.
Can I interrupt your prosaic? Can we get some of these chairs back here?
Yeah.
A lot of people are coming down. Yeah.
I don't need those stinky chairs either.
All right. So I guess we need some more ones.
Right. So there are more. There's a whole stack here that can be popped and so on.
Sorry about that.
Damn you, Korean. No, I've got completely derailed, which of course I do by myself. Anyway. Yeah. So I run. Okay, this is where stop on copy is useful. Okay. I've made some changes to this file, and what I want to do is, I know this file was spawned from another one, So I don't care about changes I made to the original file beyond where I copied it. So that's what stop on copy does. You understand what this means? You know, when a cell divides into two cells, you only care about this one. You don't care about what the parent cell did before it divided. I don't know why. Where do I get these little stories? Anyway, right. So makes sense to everyone. SD and move. New in Subversion, CVS did not have a way to do this. If you want to rename the file, there you go. And Subversion remembers the revision history of the file after you move it. It remembers it used to be called something else. So this is a wonderful thing.
That is probably one of the major reasons why you would want to make a move.
Yeah.
Out of CVS.
Well, yeah. I mean, and like I said, all of this kind of stuff, like the inability to rename files in CVS and directories and so on, really sucks when you branch. Okay, it's workable if you're one guy developing a thing, minor pain in the ass. But when you need to branch and merge.
So after you move, if you recall an old revision, what happens?
The file gets renamed to the original thing. Yeah. Yeah. That's proper. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Put a smile on my face. And so, SVN move, SVN commit. Bang bang. It's the 1-2 punch. Conflict, the C word. It's not a 4-letter word, but it is to every CVS and Subversion developer. I mean, people using them, not people actually writing them. And SVN up. I see a C, I'm like, oh shit. What C? Because you don't see them very often. You don't see them very often in CVS, and you see them even more rarely in Subversion. Because CVS and Subversion try to be your friend. They try to auto-merge things. You don't need to worry about this crap. This is, when you have more than one developer working on something, you need that stuff to be handled automatically. Because if Zev's off on vacation, and I need to call him up and say, what the hell did your change to this file mean? I mean, what am I supposed to do with it? All is not lost. All right, CVS, you can resolve conflicts, but it's pretty primitive compared to Subversions. Okay, this is the CVS way. You open the file in a text editor, and it has this jank in there, and you merge it manually. Subversion lets you do that. This means that this is from the working copy. This means that this is from revision 11 from the repository. The equals lines delimit them. So this stuff is the only difference. So I put a fancy title in my working copy, but someone else has put a title in revision 11 of the repository, and Subversion can't handle merging ASCII art. I don't know why. Wasn't there an ASCII art filter? I mean, come on. You know what I mean. All right. So, and to resolve this conflict, let me go back here. All right, if I like this, I just delete this line, okay? DD, well, here I would do like 5DD. Isn't it great after you use DI for a while, you just can count line numbers and characters in your head magically? It's the only thing I like about DI.
I disagree.
Okay, yeah. WC is running in your head. And, okay, I told you. More often than not, and in this previous case, everything was the same about those two files except for the header, right? So the other thing I can do is I can say that my copy is the one I want. I don't want anything from the repository revision because it's no good. So just copy haiku.text.mine, the original file. When Subversion hits a conflict, it creates these files with a mine extension and an R11. Oh my God! This is
probably one of the greatest.
Yes. I mean, these guys are. So, now note that this is not a Subversion copy. Okay, you are doing a Unix level file copy in your working directory. You're saying, I want my file to become the new one. Or if you like the repository one, do the other. And then, no, that's not a SVN copy. And then just, before you commit, just tell Subversion that you've resolved the conflict. All that does is it cleans up the temporary files. so it's not strictly necessary, but if you don't do it, you'll have temporary files lying around, which gets confusing. So, and I proved this by saying haiku.star, and the only one I see is the text file. And then I commit, bang. Oh no, I thought there was another way to resolve conflicts, but it doesn't matter. Those two are good enough. The CVS way and the Subversion fancy way. And note that there is no reason you can't go in and edit the haiku.txt file. You do whatever you want to it and then say SVN resolved. I mean, you don't just have to resolve the conflict. I mean, to do more, usually you don't want to do more, but I mean, there's nothing magical about this. You're editing a text file and then you're committing it. The SVN resolve just cleans up all the temporary junk. Okay, properties. I told you that Subversion keeps metadata under revision control. Well, that's what properties are. Properties, it's really just a container. I mean, you say the property, the value, and then the files that I want this property to affect. So, for example, let's say I set a copyright property on every file in my trunk. There I go. And it appears, this is strange, but it appears that prop set by default is not recursive. Okay, so there's another command. Anything that could potentially affect masses of commands, I guess you don't do. And then I commit, and it goes, let's see if I've actually got a, and I didn't show it. Okay, if I were to run svn stat-u right here, let's say that I've made some other change to haiku.txt, okay? Then I've also set this property on it. What it's going to look like in svn stat-u is it's going to show two u's side by side. Because one of them means that a metadata update has been made by me. Actually, it's not u, is it? It's m. Yeah. Anyway, two m's side by side. So one means the contents of the file have been modified locally. One means properties have been modified locally. So that's cool because it lets you know that something else is going on. Now, when it's just a property, it's not as obvious because there's just an m, and I mean, who actually counts the columns? Right. Okay. To list properties, just do svn prop list on a file. There's my example. I just got copyright. To display the value of those properties, prop get or prop list -- verbose. Either one will work. Change properties, just use prop set again, overwrite it, or use prop edit. It doesn't really matter. To delete properties, prop del. And special properties. All right, these are cool. Want to use DOS new lines? Go ahead. Now, these are magical because they start with svn colon. So do not ever invent your own property and put it in the svn colon namespace. Because there's no magic about the namespace, but if you never know that might be a real Subversion property, and that might mean something like horribly mangle this file when I commit it. All right, so svn executable, I told you there was a way to have it set the exec bit. That's it. That means every time you check out a file, its exec bit will be set. So that's for your Perl scripts. I don't know what the hell that is. MIME type is self-explanatory. svn ignore is cool. CVS could do this. If you have a bunch of files in a certain directory that are not under revision control, and let's say your macro files are under revision control, but what's generated from them aren't, and you often generate them in your working directory, and you want Subversion just to forget about that shit. That's why ignore this.
External, I think, is for pulling from a separate repository. When you check out pulls a separate repository.
Makes sense.
So you could basically have kind of a branch.
Yeah, or you could have shared libraries.
So theoretically, as the original question was, you could have a shared library as an repository that say it's merging from the...
I think the catch is you can't check it in to that repository. You can check it into your base, the one that you're editing, but you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, a really interesting thing about working copies is there's nothing stopping you from checking out shit from other repositories into your working copy. You probably don't want to do it, but there's nothing stopping you. So if you want 3 files from your shared library project in your application project's working directory, go ahead, just be careful. SVN keywords. All right, the reason that binary files are such a pain in the ass in CBS is because it does keyword substitution by default, I believe. SVN does not, okay? If you want that, you add the keyword properties. And I think I have an example of this on the next. Damn it. Or didn't I? All right. You just take keywords and then you separate these puppies with commas or colons. I don't know. It's SVN help will tell you. I'm sorry, I didn't have an example. And once you set these keywords, those keywords in the file will be substituted, just like CBS. It's.
So you do that for the file that you want to check in?
Yeah.
That's losing.
Well, okay. That's where auto props comes in.
Okay.
Remember, I said the. Yeah. What was that on? Was that commit or was that import or?
No,
I don't know. One of those fancy commands had -- auto props argument. Okay, that's where you do auto props, SVN keywords, this stuff. You would say that to a directory, and every file checked in beneath that would get reset. Okay, I've never used it, but it seems really useful. So, and okay, binary files. The long and short of it is that Subversion, there's no worries. I mean, none. It detects binary files. The delta V algorithm actually means that in CBS, when you have binary files and you committed a new revision, well, you got the whole file. Congratulations. But delta V gets binary files, so it doesn't care. So you get smaller revision chunks, smaller repository. There's still one gotcha left, which I will get to with binary files. All right, branching and tagging. This stuff is really cool. All right. I'm going to go through this really quickly.
Yeah, I don't want to be bummers, but we probably want to speed up.
Yeah. So, all right, please read over these slides when you're at home. I will post the thing. But basically, branching and tagging. The reason you might do this is you might have your production release and you might have your development release, and never the twain shall meet except when you say, let's move development into production and spend a week at the office 24 hours a day. So if you've used CBS for this, it sucks. If you use Subversion for this, it's really not bad. And that's
what sucks about it?
In CBS?
Yeah.
You find yourself as an administrator having to do a lot of things by hand in the repository. I'll collect my thoughts and email the list why I think branching and tagging sucks and CBS and why it's better. And we really don't have time for this stuff because it's in depth. But okay, neat scripts. I wrote a few that show you the files that were modified in a specific revision. All of these are like one-line shell scripts because they just do, arguments to SVN commands. Gen patch, you can give it a bunch of revisions and it will make patch files. So like I said, all that is SVN diff. So splash. SVN merge automates the merge commit dance. Just look at the scripts. I've got them on my website. I'll email that, of course. I hit the slider in this one too. Hook scripts CBS has something like them. Yeah. Hook scripts, what they do is they can enforce policy. And that could mean path-based access control inside the repository. Now with Apache and WebDAV, you get that for free because Apache has really fine-grained access controls, and you can do all sorts of stuff like only these users may commit to this, deep nested subdirectory way down in here, or this branch, this tag. But in SSH, when you're using the SSH tunneled Subversion, you have to roll it yourself. Hook scripts are simply executable programs, and they're almost always written in a scripting language, but there's nothing stopping you from compiling a C program, and as long as it does the right thing. So the hook script is triggered automatically by a repository event. It is given parameters on its command line and its arguments that tell it what's going on, and the script can, by virtue of its output or return status, either allow the action to proceed, stop it, or in one or two cases suspend it. Hooks
What's the difference between stopping and suspending?
Suspending means you can later resume the action. I mean, the administrator can do it. It's kind of like when somebody who isn't subscribed to our mailing list. Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. I actually don't know what that is, but that's what the documentation says. Hooks live in the hook subdirectory of the repository. So each new repository, when you create it, it creates a, if you look at the Unix files, there's a DB subdirectory, which is where the Berkeley DB or the FSFS data store lives. There's a hooks subdirectory. There are a few others, and hooks is automatically populated with template scripts. So, and these have the extension .tmpl, I think. So, if you want to use the template script, you typically make a few minor edits to it to match your jobby. Okay, hook scripts are start commit, which runs before the transaction is committed. Repository level access controls. So if I don't want dev committing to my repository, you can also do this with Unix groups, of course. Okay. So I have never used the start commit hook. It's useless to me. It's dead to me. Do you have a question?
No, just.
Okay.
Use it for something like single sign-on.
Yeah, you could.
Like across a big IT system.
You could.
Agrees.
Yeah, if you have one. You're right, you could. Okay, pre-commit, this one is very useful. I have no time to go through the pre-commit script that I have, but it's available for you, BSD license, take it, love it, it's commented. The one I have does all sorts of neat stuff. It does fine-grained access control, like in the subdirectories of the repository. So I can say that only people who are release engineers can commit to this branch, and I can say Zev and I are release engineers, the rest of y'all can't touch the production branch. I can also enforce some coding conventions, like if I say that indentation is done with spaces and not tabs, I can enforce that. I can also check the shebang lines to make sure you're using the right Perl interpreter. All sorts of shit. I mean, the hook script can grab the whole content of the file and it can run anything on it. Hook scripts run on the repository. They run as whatever user the server is running as, typically root. When they are invoked, they have no path environment variable. So that's one gotcha you got to be aware of. But of course, that's for security reasons. I mean, you don't want some moron messing with path and doing something crazy. Post commit, I use it for email notification of commits. I think that's 95%. You can also use it for fine-grained backup. You can run the hot backup.py script with every commit. So you can be damn sure that you're never going to lose anything. You can also be damn sure you're going to run out of disk space. But okay. There are certain properties that are not revision controlled, notably SVN log messages. Most metadata is, but these aren't. So these two guys are for controlling access to those properties. So, you want to be a little more careful with those guys. If somebody changes the log message, you might want to know about it. So these two are the same as pre and post commit, but they're for okay.
Can I ask one quick question on that? Because it's interesting. We sometimes have issue where people have trailing white space at the end of the lines.
Yeah.
And I really hate that because it messes up everything. And
yes,
so we're trying to control that, but you can use CVS or Subversion to basically say, okay, I'm not going to let you commit it because you have trailing white space, go clean it up. It would be nice if we could just automate it, but I guess there's no way to let you say, okay.
No, you can, but the Subversion documentation says don't do that.
Yeah. Don't
ever modify a transaction. You will be sorry.
Mm.
So the way to do that is write a wrapper script that runs on their box, and when they run SVN commit, and it does shit. Okay, sorry. You can deny them commit, and in fact, we did all sorts of that stuff at my last job. I had draconian coding conventions, and
well, it helps. I guess I'll ask you, the SVN blame. Part of the problem with that is that if someone makes a commit and all they did was remove trailing white space, then you don't really have the proper blame. It's like, oh, he wrote that code, but he didn't really do that. So you have to actually have some type of further history to say who may decide some weird, logic statement.
Right you are. Okay, so I've talked about Subversion as it applies to coders. I've talked to it as it applies to like lead developers or project managers, technical leads, whatever. No, but for those of you who are doing systems, why not keep your config files and your dot files in Subversion? I mean, everything in Etsy, why not? I mean, because Unix is Unix. You can configure everything, and you will shoot yourself in the foot. It's just a matter of when you'll shoot yourself and how bad the wound is. I mean, and this has happened to me time and time again. I make a change to my SSHD config file. 6 months later, I realize, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. But I made 5 other changes to it, and if I don't have revision control, I'm fucked. So, in config files, here's a quick one. Create a repository, import Etsy. All right, you create your skeleton, use rsync to suck in Etsy. Okay, sudo, right? Chown it to your user, all right, because you do not want to use Subversion as root. I mean, it's not dangerous, but why should you? I mean, it's not especially dangerous, but in Unix, thou shalt not be root, unless thou must. So, I import it, I check it out. Okay, I make a change to my etsymake.conf, which all Gentoo users know is the keys to the kingdom. Now, here's the cool thing. I make my change in my working copy. I do a sudo cp etsymake.conf to /etsymake.conf, and the permissions and ownerships of this baby are preserved. So I don't have to worry that my working copy is all owned by me and I can diddle the permissions however I want. Copy it over a file per op. Test the change, commit the new revision. Okay? Dot files you can do the same way, or you can actually just symlink your dot files into your working copy. I don't know if anybody can actually read that, but that's me running ls-l.xemax, and it shows that it's a symlink to dot files trunk xemax. Okay. I actually think the way to handle it is to use the config files thing and not symlinks. But I started out with symlinks, so we still have that. And in the case of config files and dot files, use branches for different boxing or different groups of boxing. Like my example here is my laptop runs a different resolution than my desktop, right? Screen resolution. So the differing Etsy, X11, Xorgs.confs can be in different branches, but the meat of my Xorg.conf might be the same, or it might not. Who knows? So I believe, yeah, that is it. So SVN documentation. If you run Gentoo, it's in user shared docs, and like I said, I will post a follow-up to this to the list. So if you have further questions, ask me then, and I don't want to take any more time than I already have, lest I be smitten. And FFmpeg, how big is that bastard?
Josh, is this application installed default in any distros at the moment?
Subversion?
Yeah.
Probably.
You know,
Can anybody speak to that? Not on Gentoo, because nothing is.
Maybe like Fedora 4.4 or something like that.
Fedora 4. What about CentOS, which is a clone of Red Hat?
Yeah, I know some of the CentOS developers, and I kind of doubt it. I mean, it is still new. A lot of people still use CVS because for a lot of things it's good enough. I mean, it's only the really hairy stuff that's Subversion.
How do you educate all your developers not just how you can?
Exactly.
And that would be a big challenge to get this.
Yeah. Well, luckily, the command lines are so similar that, I mean, when we did it at my last job, it was an edict from on high. I convinced the bosses to do it, and the bosses said, "Thou shalt," and nobody bitched, complained, or moaned, which is probably the first time that's ever happened at this company I worked for. And so, yeah, I think path of least resistance.
One more quick question. I heard you mention using SSH tunnel preventers, right?
Yeah.
That means you have to have a service listening, or you meant using SSH as a remote shell?
SSH is the remote shell.
Remote shell, not tunnel, right?
Yeah. It works the same way as, yeah.
Okay.
It's not a tunnel.